Your World at 10. Now, earlier today, French energy giant Areva and the Nuclear Power Corporation of India signed an MOU to build a nuclear power plant at Jaitapur, that's in coastal Maharashtra. The plant received conditional approval from the Environment Ministry just last week, but there is still widespread concern about the impact this plant and other power plants that have been planned in the region will have on the ecosystem in the Konkan belt in Maharashtra, an ecosystem that is acknowledged to be rich, diverse and fragile. Well, joining us to discuss that, we have Professor Madhav Gadgil, a member of the National Advisory Council and an expert on the ecosystem in the Western Ghats and the Konkan region. Professor Gadgil, thank you very much for joining us to talk about the impact of not just the Jaitapur nuclear power plant, but the cumulative impact of all the power plants that are coming up on the region. Let me start with my first question. The nuclear power plant is, of course, one big concern, but you're more concerned about the lack of a comprehensive environmental impact assessment of the more than 33,000 megawatts of power capacity that's coming up in that area, correct?
It is very true that a whole range of power projects, mining projects, a whole range of developmental activities are being planned, and the environmental impact assessments individually of these activities are also not really carefully enough done. I have seen a number of these reports and they leave much to be desired, including the Jaitapur nuclear power plant assessment leaves much to be desired. But I believe what is even more important is the fact that right now we are looking at all of these in isolation, one by one, and the cumulative impacts can be very serious and they have been completely ignored, and we must look carefully at each individual project and more importantly at their cumulative impacts. I think this is critical.
Dr. Gadgil, you are recognized as one of the most distinguished ecologists, in the minister's own words, as well as the chairman of the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel. Can you give us a sense of what exactly is at risk here when you emphasize on how ecologically fragile this area is?
There has been very inadequate consideration of the biodiversity of the region. Perhaps the best document is a zoning atlas for siting of industries prepared by Maharashtra Pollution Control Board as part of a countrywide project coordinated by Central Pollution Control Board. If you look at that project, its biodiversity map shows only the reserve forest and the mangrove forest, ignores everything else. It so happens that due to a whole range of historical developments, there is very little reserve forest in Ratnagiri district, but there is a large chunk of very species rich, very important private forest. The reserve forest is only 2.5%, the private forest may be of the order of 40%. The 37.5% are completely ignored. Secondly, it is not just forest. The laterite plateaus of Konkan are famous for their biological diversity. I believe that they are amongst the richest in terms of species restricted to India. This is not at all acknowledged in this zoning atlas for siting of industries or in any of the individual environmental impact assessments of Konkan region that I have had a chance to look at. So we have given very little thought to all of this. Apart from the natural biodiversity, mango-based horticulture, cashew-based horticulture and fisheries are very important to the livelihoods of the people of this region. They have also been not adequately considered in any of the impact assessments. Coming to cumulative, for instance, these large number of power projects will lead to huge amount of export of power out of Konkan. Konkan doesn't need all this power. So there will be high tension lines crisscrossing all of Konkan and all of Western Ghats. Not a single environmental impact assessment done so far looks at the impact of these power lines. And under these power lines, mango cashew nut plantations cannot be permitted. So perhaps most of the area of mango and cashew nut plantations will go out of production because of these power lines. As I seat. None of this has been taken on board.
So these gaps become even more worrisome when you consider the speedy approval that this project seems to have been given. I'm referring to the Jaitapur nuclear power plant. Let me quote to you from the minister's own report, and he says the decision to accord environmental clearance for NPCIL's Jaitapur power generating complex has been difficult. On the one hand, there have been many issues raised on the preservation of marine biodiversity, an area in which India has been very weak, but at the same time there are weighty strategic and economic reasons in favor of the grant of environmental clearance now. Do you think, however important those economic reasons are, they should be allowed to make vulnerable such an ecologically fragile region as the Ratnagiri area?
The whole process of looking at the environmental cost benefits and social cost benefits of these projects is certainly very deficient as of today, and yes, I believe the clearance to Jaitapur project also has not been given after careful, adequate examination of these issues. There may be other economic strategic reasons which I am not really competent to comment on why this has been given so rapidly, but otherwise I think on environmental or even social grounds, all these Konkan projects should be examined carefully in depth before we take further steps.
All right, so thank you very much for joining us. I have several questions pertaining to specifically the nuclear power plant, which I know you do not want to answer. As you say, you don't have enough technical information regarding this. So I'm going to point those questions now to our next guest, Adwait Pednekar, the convener of the Konkan Bachao Samiti. Adwait, thank you very much for joining us this evening. You have vehemently opposed this nuclear power plant coming up in Jaitapur. This despite the fact that the minister says he has put 35 conditions and safeguards, of which 23 are specific conditions. Are you not happy with the safeguard and conditions that he's put in place, and why not?
Well, Menaka, thanks for giving me this opportunity to the Konkan Bachao Samiti. Something which I would like to say right in the beginning is that Konkan Bachao Samiti is basically opposed to the nuclear power as such. So whether it's Jaitapur or anywhere else in India, we would be opposing that in principle. Now we need to really look at the energy demand and projections. Are those scientific or not? That is one part of it. Professor Madhav Gadgil has commented on the other part of the environment. That's true. We have been very categorically saying that the entire EIA prepared for Jaitapur nuclear power project is absolutely a shabby and unscientific exercise. Another part is why we are saying that nuclear is not the option for us is very simple. One is it's dangerous and hazardous because of the radioactivity, and that's also not for a short period, but it's going to be running into thousands of years. This is one. Second point is obviously it is very expensive.
Let's focus then on why you definitely don't think this should be located in as fragile a zone as the Ratnagiri area. And my specific question to you is, the minister has taken all your concerns on board in his report and says that on the basis of the several concerns raised, he is putting in 23 specific conditions for this power project to go ahead. Are you not happy with these conditions that include appropriate monitoring committees and plans to ensure that there is minimal impact on the surrounding environment?
Well, we are not happy. Let me say that up front. The reason is, in case of a nuclear power plant, 70 to 80% of the impact is going to be because of the radioactivity, the waste generated there, which is going to be radioactive. That is one. Spent fuel, its storage and the disposal, another part of it. Now, if this aspect of the entire environmental impact assessment is not at all addressed, now how can you have only 20% of the part looked at and a clearance being granted? And as you rightly pointed out to the communication which Mr. Jairam Ramesh has put in, where he says that the weighty strategic and economic reasons have obviously tilted the decision in favor of this project. So it doesn't make any sense. Is it not illogical and hasty decision to do that? Such kind of projects ideally should be subjected to a very thorough scientific scrutiny.
Can you list out to me concerns on a priority basis that you would like to see being addressed by both this ministry, that's the Environment Ministry, as well as the Atomic Energy Board?
See, one thing is, as you rightly said, and what Mr. Jairam Ramesh also has said in his communique, that the radioactivity, safety, security, these parts are basically under the purview of AERB. But then ultimately it's the environmental clearance which has to be the responsibility of MOEF. So MOEF cannot just shirk away from that responsibility. That is the first thing. And what we have been saying is this project needs to be put to a thorough scientific inquiry all across on all the counts, right from the environment, technology, radioactivity part of it, storage and other stuff, cost. That is another important aspect, because we have been opposed to nuclear power because of its two aspects, that is radioactivity, its fallouts and its dangers. Second one is the cost part of it. So unless and until this is done, AERB's process has to be brought up into public domain, which is not today. So that something has to be done, and which is happening right now even in the other part of the world, whether it's Europe or in the US. Like AERB's process, the parallel processes run in US as well as in Europe are absolutely in public domain.
Alright, that's a fair demand then, to make sure that the AERB process is in the public domain and walks alongside the Environmental Ministry's process. Adwait, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I understand your concerns with regards to nuclear power, though I must tell you several studies have proved that it does work out to be cheaper over the long term. But nonetheless, I do also understand the specific concern of locating a power plant of nuclear power in Jaitapur. Thank you very much.